Wealth, Yoga, Wine. Welcome to my podcast. I'm Valerie Hail. What is your default response when it comes to a conflict? Boggs teaches us that there are 4 choices, actually, and is that to avoid a conflict? Are we obliging in a conflict? Do we compromise in a conflict? Or do we dominate in a conflict? Some of us can be guilty of all 4, or maybe we should say we actually employ all 4. I have a tendency, I'll be honest, to dominate in a conflict. However, studying with brave thinking masters, people like Boggs, I am learning to compromise. Napoleon Hill tells us that the greatest of all riches can be evaluated only in terms of lasting friendships. Now, this means harmonious family relationships. It also means in business relationships. The sympathy and understanding that we have in a business environment is vital to the success of a business. Look at the great resignation that we have gone through as a country. I'm going to use as an example Dolphin Landings, because I worked there, and I had a small conflict with Cindy, who actually goes by C4, because evidently at one point there were 4 Cindys. What Rich teaches us, in order to resolve a conflict, especially at work, one thing you want to do to begin the conversation is to set the intention. You also want to have no opinions. You want to express what you saw in the conflict, how you feel about the conflict. You want to say what you would love. And lastly, set a new agreement. These sound so easy. I know they're not. It takes practice, and it takes what we call brave communication. It takes courage to resolve a conflict. With Cindy and I worked in the office. Now, this is a beautiful sailboat chartering company. Cindy has worked there, I think, for 30 years now. She has an amazingly complicated accounting system, and I am horrible with this kind of work. However, she's a very good teacher. At the very beginning, though, it was really difficult for me to grasp the accounting. Try as I might, I kept making little mistakes that she had to correct, and I know after being there for 30 years, anyone who's owned a business, the back of your mind goes, "Dummy, why can't you get this?" She never acted that way. Not intentionally. At one point, I felt she did, and that's when we had to resolve the conflict. It was easy for both of us to resolve because Cindy has been trained in this also, not through Brave Masters Thinking, but Captain Dan Peretz, who owns Dolphin Landings and also SOS, the nonprofit, made sure that people learned how to resolve conflict in a professional way. Cindy and I had the conversation. This is what I see about me making mistakes. This is how I feel about your response to my mistakes. What I'd love is more training, more hands-on training, because I'm one of those people when it's really difficult, I have to see it and feel it and experience it a few times, especially when it's complicated. And then a new agreement. And we got there. It was so easy to resolve. We resolved it in one day. There were no hard feelings. I didn't have opinions. She didn't have opinions. But this also comes from top leadership with Dan, because Dan wants his managers to work with other people. His sailboat company, Dolphin Landings, they have 3 ships, 3 sailboats, and several employees. It's important that they all be able to communicate in an adult manner in order to resolve situations. So remember, if you're going to do brave communication and resolve something, there's 4 easy steps to take. Next, in Kundalini Yoga, this might sound unusual, But in Kundalini Yoga, they also teach kriyas, which will help us resolve conflicts. One of the reasons I believe in the corporate environment we are having such strong, stressful situations is, of course, the pandemic, COVID, masks, vaccinations. There is a way that you can de-stress your brain. The guru on SeekNet, which I have the recording on the podcast details, teaches us that this is brain acupuncture, and it literally takes you 3 minutes a day to do it. He points out that we are feeling a lot of stress and being overwhelmed because social media, our machines, our iPad, our laptops, our iPhones, they all travel with us. We get caught up in checking our email, checking our text messages, Instagram, Facebook. You can stop feeling overwhelmed, I promise, by practicing this 3-minute kriya with him. He says at the end of the class, you don't need to go to a therapist for $140 an hour. I'm teaching you self-therapy. Lastly, wine. I have worked in the fine wine industry for 26 years, mostly in New York, predominantly in New York. One of the most difficult aspects of selling fine wine and fine spirits is working with accounts that really don't know what they're doing. It's a stressful job, believe it or not. A lot of people think it's glamorous. The glamorous side can be the fact that you are traveling to other countries, sometimes as a group, sometimes on your own. I did it a lot of times on my own with other friends, other colleagues in the wine industry. When you go with a group, I can promise you it is not fun because it's way too much drinking, way too much traveling in a bus. However, as an everyday consumer, I want to guide you to working with a good wine store. The reason being, generally the manager or the owner and the staff, if it's a good wine store, and I'll get to that, what are the criteria for a good wine store, will know their stuff, as we say. They will have been to vineyards. They have certainly been to several tastings. They do reading. They'll watch videos. You don't have to be trained in any kind of society, a wine society, to know your stuff. You do not have to be a sommelier. I'm going to point out one specific person with whom it has been a pleasure to work, and that's Dan Spadalo. Probably mispronounced his name. I always called him Dan. He became the owner within the last 2 years of Suburban Wines in northern Westchester, New York. The reason Dan and his staff are so easy to work with is because they all have good knowledge of specific countries. For me, as a wine salesperson, even though I specialized in French wine, I also had to be a generalist, meaning I had to know Italian wines, I had to know Spanish wines, I had to know Portuguese wines, and all kinds of spirits. It's a lot of knowledge. I did choose, though, for 26 years to specialize in French wines, and today I still know more about French wines than I do in any other country. One of the reasons it's important to work with a knowledgeable wine store is because the rest of their staff is also serious about training. And they will know when you come into the store and you say, I'm looking for a specific wine that tastes like this, they can help you find it or discover an alternative. I fill in occasionally at a wine store and I will hear a customer come in and talk to someone who may not be as knowledgeable, and they will say, I'm looking for a wine that tastes like this. I had it in Europe. I don't expect the same thing, but I would like this flavor profile. Or maybe it's a name of a wine that you folks don't carry, that the store doesn't carry. Instead of working with that customer maybe 10 or 15 minutes longer, they will, if they don't have that in the store, if they don't have it, or they can't figure out exactly what the customer wants, they let them leave. It drives me crazy to see a customer leave a wine store. especially, now I've never seen this happen at Suburban, but I never worked there. I only did wine tastings for them. And of course I would go in and taste Dan and his staff on the specific wines I was carrying that day. Dan and his staff at Suburban really know how to work with customers. I have seen them in action for years. That is one of the reasons you want to work with a specific wine store. These wine stores do not do the large wine tastings any longer that last 5 hours and have massive amounts of wines. I'm very happy to hear that. I have a feeling the salespeople in the other companies, the representatives, they're happy to hear that too. Instead, because of COVID, you are seeing more intimate wine tastings, very small, which were much easier to control as far as just 6 feet apart. That is the main reason I'm suggesting Suburban Wines for people to check out. Also because they ship. When you sign up for their newsletter, you also will receive a daily newsletter from them that's short and sweet and will talk about specific wines. They will also talk about specific fine spirits. I saw recently on their website, the title was, "Whoever heard of Pinot Grigio in Germany?" They chose a wine that I did not know, but it is extremely affordable, and I trust the staff explicitly, which is another reason to work with a good wine store. I do know that Yerman makes a Pinot Grigio that is expensive but outrageous. While you're shopping for this other German wine, which Dan talks about, or not quite sure who's talking about it, who writes about it, but ask about Yerman Pinot Grigio, because that is a wine that you think you have gone to heaven drinking. To wrap this up, to resolve conflicts, especially in the workplace, it's 4 easy steps. I'm not going to tell you not to get emotional because it is an emotional event. It takes bravery. It takes what we call brave communication to step up to the plate and resolve something, to have peace of mind is really at the bottom line. Also, practice this kriya that's called brain acupuncture. It will de-stress you. You will stop feeling overwhelmed. You will learn how to take all these steps and create a much easier path for yourself every day and not allowing all of our machines and all the social media to take over our lives. Lastly, you can order online from Suburban Wines, sign up for their newsletter. You can call Dan. He never answers the phone. I'm just kidding. I've talked to him many, many times since I left the industry. But it's worth it to have a good wine store. And if you need suggestions, I know all the wine stores in New York about the fine wine ones. I know several in Florida. Don't know any in any other state, but I can help you with 2 states out of 50. Lastly, I am not a life consultant. I'm not a life coach. I produce this podcast weekly in order to help hundreds of people around the world. I am an affiliate with Mary Morrissey and her son, Matt Boggs, and I always include, or generally include, a free ebook to help you learn meditations, or with Matt, a self-love activation kit. My goal is for people to enroll with Mary or Matt's programs because it will change your life in the best way. Merci.